The USS Endeavour glided silently through the void, its fusion engines leaving a blue trail of ionized particles in the endless blackness of space. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the distant star that marked their destination, Kepler Prime, the ceremonial planet where humanity would finally take its place among the stars. 50 years, Jake whispered to himself. 50 years since we built our first interstellar ship, and tomorrow we join the Galactic Council. His reflection in the reinforced glass showed a man of 45, with lines around his eyes that spoke of both determination and hope. His uniform, adorned with the Earth United insignia, felt heavy with responsibility. History would remember this mission, and as commander of Earth's flagship, he carried the aspirations of billions. "Commander," a voice called from behind. "The diplomatic team requests your presence in Conference Room 1. Jake turned to see his communications officer, a young lieutenant whose name escaped him in that moment of contemplation. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." The corridors of the Endeavour were bustling with activity. Crew members saluted as he passed, their faces filled with the same excitement that permeated the entire ship. Humanity's first official diplomatic mission to join the interstellar community was the culmination of generations of work. In Conference Room 1, Lisa Carter was reviewing documents on a holographic display. At 36, she was Earth's premier negotiator, having mediated conflicts from the African continental disputes to the Martian independence talks. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her fingers moved deftly across the translucent screens, reorganizing paragraphs of the treaty text. "Lisa, you wanted to see me," Jake asked, taking a seat across from her. She nodded without looking up. "I've been going through the treaty one last time before the ceremony. There's something odd about a subsection in the trade agreements. It's written in what appears to be an ancient dialect of the Council's common language." "Is that unusual?" "Very. Most of the document uses standard diplomatic language. This section uses archaic terms I've had to cross-reference with linguistic databases." She frowned. "The translation matrix is giving me conflicting interpretations." Captain Roy Blake entered the room, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. The military leader of the mission carried himself with the confidence of someone who had faced combat in the Mars rebellions and lived to tell about it. His weathered face broke into a rare smile. 24 hours until we make history," he said. "Admiral Sullivan just transmitted her congratulations from Earth Command." Jake nodded. Admiral Kate Sullivan, the highest-ranking military officer on Earth, had been instrumental in securing funding for the diplomatic mission. Her political savvy had united the fractious Earth governments behind the idea of joining the Galactic Council. "What about the treaty issue?" Jake asked, turning back to Lisa. She shrugged. "Probably nothing. Cultural differences in legal frameworks. I've noted it for clarification during the preliminary meeting." "Good," Roy said. "We can't afford any delays or misunderstandings." The council representatives made it clear this opportunity might not come again for decades if we miss it. Jake sensed Roy's impatience. The captain had always been a man of action, preferring direct approaches to diplomatic subtleties. It made him an excellent military leader, but sometimes put him at odds with the mission's diplomatic focus. "We'll be arriving at Kepler Prime in 18 hours, Jake said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we make history." As they dispersed, Lisa lingered, her eyes still on the puzzling section of the treaty. Something about it bothered her, but she couldn't quite place what. The translation matrix had flagged potential multiple meanings, but none seemed particularly concerning in context. With a sigh, she closed the holographic display and headed to her quarters. Kepler Prime loomed large in the viewports as the Endeavour achieved orbit. The planet was a swirl of purple and blue, its atmosphere rich with noble gases that created spectacular auroras around both poles. The designated landing zone was a massive platform constructed specifically for diplomatic functions, rising above the planet's toxic-to-human surface. The Endeavour's shuttle bay opened, and 3 smaller craft descended toward the platform. Jake, Lisa, and Roy led the delegation, accompanied by 20 crew members representing Earth's various nations and specialties. The landing platform was already occupied by representatives from dozens of species. Tall, slender beings with iridescent skin stood alongside stocky creatures whose rock-like exteriors suggested evolution on high-gravity worlds. Hovering spheres that contained gaseous life forms mingled with arthropod-like species whose complex exoskeletons clicked as they moved. At the center of it all stood the 7 counselors, the leading representatives of the Galactic Council. Their species had been the first to achieve interstellar travel, and they had shaped the political structure of known space for millennia. The head counselor, a being named Zavranex, approached the human delegation. His species resembled upright felines with 6 limbs and smooth golden fur. When he spoke, his translator rendered his words into perfect English. Commander Morrison, Negotiator Carter, Captain Blake, Earth welcomes you to the family of civilized worlds. Today marks the beginning of a new era for your species. The ceremony proceeded with elaborate ritual. Speeches were made, gifts exchanged, and eventually the treaty was presented. A massive document projected for all to see, with thousands of subsections covering everything from trade rights to cultural exchange protocols. Lisa stepped forward when it came time for Earth's signature. Her hand hovered over the authentication pad as she scanned the document one last time. The troubling section was there, still in that ancient dialect, but the translator provided the same benign interpretation about resource sharing and mutual defense. She pressed her palm to the pad, and her biometric signature registered, binding Earth to the agreement. The gathered representatives applauded, and Zavranex stepped forward again. The inclusion of Earth into the Galactic Council is now complete. Let us celebrate this momentous occasion. The festivities lasted for hours. Exotic foods and drinks were shared. Music from 100 worlds played simultaneously in a surprisingly harmonious symphony, and the humans mingled with their new galactic neighbors. It was during these celebrations that Lisa noticed something disturbing. Several of the council representatives were speaking in hushed tones, glancing occasionally at the human delegation with expressions she couldn't quite read but which seemed predatory. She made her way to Jake, who was engaged in conversation with a representative from a waterworld species. "Commander, I need a word," she whispered. They stepped away from the gathering, finding a quiet corner of the vast platform. "Something's wrong," Lisa said. "I've been observing the council members. They're celebrating differently than they appear to be with us." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" "The treaty section I was concerned about. I've been running it through more translation matrices on my personal device. One of the possible interpretations is—" She swallowed hard. "Protective custody." "That could mean anything in diplomatic terms," Jake said, though a hint of worry crept into his voice. "Yes, but coupled with what I'm seeing here." She gestured subtly toward a group of council representatives who were now openly staring at them. "I think we should consider returning to the Endeavour earlier than planned." Jake nodded slowly. "I'll speak with Roy. We'll make an excuse about preparing the ship for the official welcome ceremony tomorrow." But it was already too late. As they turned to find Roy, a loud tone reverberated through the platform. All conversations ceased, and Zavranex stepped onto a raised dais at the center of the gathering. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying easily across the space. "Today marks not only the inclusion of Earth into our community, but also the implementation of Protection Protocol 739. Lisa's blood ran cold. She had just seen that protocol number in the treaty section she'd been worried about. As agreed upon by Earth's authorized representative, Zavranex continued, gesturing toward Lisa. Humanity has acknowledged its need for guidance and protection as it develops further. The Council fleet has already departed for Earth to establish the necessary oversight infrastructure. Jake turned to Lisa, his face pale. What is he talking about? The treaty, she whispered, horror dawning on her face. The section in the ancient dialect. It wasn't about mutual defense. It was about surrendering Earth's sovereignty. Roy pushed his way through the crowd to join them, his hand already on his sidearm. We need to leave. Now. They began moving toward their shuttle, but Council security forces were already closing in. Earth, representatives, Zavranex called. There is no need for alarm. This is for your benefit. Your species has been deemed too aggressive for unsupervised interstellar presence. The Council will ensure your peaceful development under our guidance. You mean our subjugation, Roy growled. Jake assessed the situation quickly. The security forces were closing in, but they hadn't yet blocked all paths to the shuttles. On my mark, he whispered. We make for Shuttle 2. Lisa, alert the crew. Roy, you're with me. Lisa tapped a code into her communicator, a pre-arranged emergency signal to the Endeavour crew attending the ceremony. Across the platform, human attendees began discreetly moving toward the shuttles. Now, Jake commanded, and they broke into a run. Council security gave chase immediately. Energy weapons discharged, striking the ground near their feet. Warning shots, for now. Roy drew his sidearm and returned fire, aiming above the security forces' heads. Just buying time, he shouted to Jake as they ran. They reached Shuttle 2 just as the rest of their crew converged on the landing pad. The shuttle doors opened, and they piled inside. Jake took the pilot's seat, bypassing the pre-flight checks as he fired up the engines. Endeavour. This is Morrison, he transmitted. Prepare for emergency departure. The Council has betrayed us. The shuttle lifted off amid a barrage of energy weapons fire. Several bolts struck the hull, but the shuttle's shields held. As they accelerated away from the platform, Jake could see Council ships already moving to intercept them. Evasive maneuvers, Roy ordered, taking the co-pilot seat. We need to reach the Endeavour before they can lock us down. The shuttle weaved through Kepler Prime's upper atmosphere, pursued by smaller Council craft. The Endeavour grew larger in their viewport, its hangar bay doors already open in anticipation of their arrival. All hands, battle stations. Jake transmitted as they approached. Prepare for immediate departure from Kepler system. The shuttle slid into the hangar bay, and Jake didn't wait for the atmospheric seal before he was running for the bridge, Roy and Lisa close behind. On the bridge, chaos reigned as officers responded to the sudden crisis. The tactical officer reported, Council vessels moving to block orbital exits. We're being hailed on all frequencies. Ignore them, Jake ordered, taking his command chair. Navigation. Plot the fastest course out of the system. Engineering. I need everything you can give the engines. Lisa stood at the communication station, her face ashen as she monitored transmissions. Jake, she said, her voice barely audible. They're already at Earth. A Council fleet has surrounded the planet. Jake's heart sank. On screen, the main display showed a transmission from Earth. Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared, grim and resolute. Endeavour, this is Earth Command. A massive alien fleet has established orbit around Earth and is broadcasting a message about protective custody. They're claiming authority under a treaty provision. What the hell is happening out there? We've been betrayed, Jake replied. The treaty contained hidden terms. They're planning to subjugate humanity. Kate's expression hardened. The Council fleet is demanding Earth's immediate disarmament and the cessation of all independent military operations. They've given us 6 hours to comply. Don't do it, Jake urged. We're coming back with everything we've got. Negative, Endeavor, Kate replied. You're outgunned and Earth is surrounded. For now. We play along while we assess the situation. Her voice dropped lower. But this isn't over. Rocky Mountain's protocol is in effect. Sullivan out. The transmission ended, and Jake turned to Roy. Rocky Mountain's protocol? Roy's expression was grim. Contingency plan for alien hostilities. Secret bases in the Rocky Mountains with experimental weapons tech and energy shields. Kate's telling us to stay away and build resistance elsewhere. Jake nodded slowly, understanding the strategy. Navigation. Change of plans. Set course for the Oort cloud at maximum speed. We need to disappear. As the Endeavor accelerated away from Kepler Prime, Council vessels gave chase but soon fell behind. The Earth ship's engines had been designed with speed in mind, anticipating the need to cover vast interstellar distances. In the conference room, Jake gathered his senior officers. Roy paced the room, barely containing his anger, while Lisa sat motionless, the weight of guilt visible in her posture. This isn't your fault, Jake said to her. The Council deliberately concealed the true meaning of that treaty section. I should have caught it, she whispered. That's my job. I failed humanity. We all failed, Roy said, surprising everyone with his inclusiveness rather than blame. We were too eager to join their club, too trusting. Jake nodded. What's done is done. Now we focus on what comes next. We can't go back to Earth. We'd be captured immediately. But we can't abandon our people either. The Rocky Mountains Protocol, Roy said. Kate wouldn't have mentioned it if she didn't have a plan. There are rumors about what they've been developing in those facilities. Plasma weapons, energy shields, tech that might even the odds. But we need more than tech, Jake said. We need allies, intelligence, a way to fight back against an enemy that controls the entire Council. Lisa looked up, a spark returning to her eyes. Not the entire Council. During the ceremony, I noticed tension between some of the representatives. The Corvin delegation seemed particularly unhappy with Zavernex's announcements. The Corvin, Roy mused, weren't they brought into the Council relatively recently? Within the last century? Lisa nodded. And according to the databases we studied, their integration wasn't entirely smooth. There were rebellions. Jake leaned forward. So they might be sympathetic to our situation? It's a start, Roy agreed. But we need more than sympathy. We need ships, weapons, and intelligence about Council defenses. We also need a base, Jake said. Somewhere to coordinate from. Somewhere the Council won't immediately look for us. For hours they discussed options, plotting a course of action. Eventually, a plan began to take shape. The Endeavor would head for the edges of Council space, seeking out potential allies among species with grievances against the Central Authority. Meanwhile, they would establish communications with Earth resistance through covert channels. 6 weeks passed. The Endeavor, now operating under communications, silence except for encrypted burst transmissions, had established a hidden base in an asteroid field, at the edge of what humans called the Proxima Centauri system. Several smaller craft, salvaged from abandoned mining operations, allowed their crew to begin reconnaissance missions into nearby systems. Jake stood in the command center they'd built within the largest asteroid, reviewing reports from their scouts. Roy entered, looking more determined than ever. We've made contact with the Corvin separatists, he announced. They're willing to meet. How do we know it's not a trap? Jake asked. We don't. But our contact provided intelligence about Council patrol patterns that matches our observations. And they knew details about the subjugation protocols that we've seen implemented on Earth. Lisa, who had been working tirelessly to establish an intelligence network, joined them. The weeks of work had transformed her from a guilt-ridden diplomat to a focused intelligence operator. The Corvin were subjected to the same treatment 80 years ago. They've been fighting a guerrilla war against Council control ever since. "What about Earth?" Jake asked. "Any news?" Lisa nodded. Susan Clark has established a spy network operating from lunar bases. They're transmitting using old radio frequencies the Council considers obsolete. Earth resistance is organizing, centered around the Rocky Mountains facilities. "And Ben Hayes?" Roy asked, referring to the chief engineer who had been developing weapons modifications based on what they'd learned about Council technology. "His team has made progress with the plasma weapon prototypes," Lisa replied. "The modifications to our shuttle engines are complete as well. We can now match Council ship speeds." Jake nodded. "Set up the meeting with the Corvin. It's time we started building our alliance." The meeting took place on a desolate moon, orbiting a gas giant in unclaimed space. Jake, Roy, and Lisa represented the Endeavor, while the Corvin sent 3 of their own, tall, willowy beings with 4 arms and skin that seemed to shift colors with their emotions. The Corvin leader, who called himself Czar, spoke without preamble. "Your species is not the first to be deceived by the Council. They have been expanding their control using these methods for millennia." "We're building resistance," Jake said. "But we need allies, information, and technology." Czar's skin rippled with a pattern that their translator indicated represented grim satisfaction. "The Corvin separatists have been waiting for an opportunity like this, alone. Neither of us can stand against the Council. Together, we might have a chance." "We're not alone," Lisa interjected. "Earth continues to resist, and our intelligence suggests other species chafe under Council rule." "The Free Worlds Alliance," Czar agreed. "A coalition of resistance movements from subjugated planets. We have contacts." Over the next few hours, they shared information. The Corvin had developed techniques for disrupting Council communications and had detailed knowledge of patrol routes. In exchange, the humans offered insights into the Rocky Mountains Protocol, experimental technologies that might give them an edge. "We will need more than 2 species," Roy pointed out. "The Council controls thousands of worlds. Quality over quantity." "Captain," Czar replied, "many Council military vessels are automated or staffed with beings who serve out of fear rather than loyalty. If we can demonstrate successful resistance, others will join." As the meeting concluded, a plan began to take shape. The Human-Corvin Alliance would establish contact with the Free Worlds Alliance. Together, they would coordinate simultaneous strikes against Council supply lines while building up their forces in secret. "This is just the beginning," Jake told his officers as they returned to their base. "But for the first time since Kepler Prime, I believe we have a chance." Meanwhile, on Earth, the Council's protective occupation had quickly revealed its true nature. Humanity was permitted to continue its daily activities. But, under strict supervision, space travel was restricted, advanced weapons research prohibited, and Council advisors were installed in every major government. In the Rocky Mountains complex, hidden beneath thousands of feet of rock, Admiral Kate Sullivan met with the leaders of Earth's resistance. Ben Hayes, who had remained on Earth, presented his latest weapons development, a plasma rifle capable of penetrating Council armor. "We've made progress," he told Kate, "but we're limited by what we can build in secret. The Council monitors all major industrial facilities." "We do what we can with what we have," Kate replied. "What about the defense shields?" Amy Rodriguez, a brilliant physicist who had been working on energy shield technology before the occupation, stepped forward. "The prototypes are functional but limited in scale. We can protect this facility and perhaps a few others, but not entire cities." "That's enough for now," Kate said. "We don't need to protect everything. We just need secure bases from which to operate. She turned to Susan Clark, her intelligence chief. What news from the lunar network? Susan's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Our agents have infiltrated the Council's lunar base. We're gathering intelligence on their communication systems, patrol schedules, and, most importantly, the location of their central command ship. And the Endeavor? Kate asked. Still operational. They've made contact with alien resistance movements. Jake is building an alliance. Kate nodded, a fierce pride in her eyes. Then we continue as planned. Small strikes. Gather intelligence. Build our strength. The Council thinks they've conquered a docile species. They're about to learn how wrong they are. In the months that followed, the resistance grew stronger. The Endeavor, now joined by a small fleet of Corvin ships and vessels from the Free Worlds Alliance, conducted hit-and-run attacks on Council supply lines. Each successful operation yielded more resources, more allies, and more intelligence. On Titan, Saturn's largest moon, Paul Murphy led a special Mars-trained combat unit in a daring raid on a Council communications hub. The operation not only disrupted Council coordination, but also provided access codes to their secure channels. The Council responded by increasing their military presence in the Sol system, particularly around Titan. A fleet of 200 vessels established orbit around Saturn, their commanding officer broadcasting threats to any who would dare challenge Council authority. Jake, monitoring the situation from their expanded base in the asteroid field, saw an opportunity. They're concentrating their forces, he told Roy during a strategy session. That makes them a target. Roy frowned. 200 ships against our 50. Those aren't good odds, Jake. Quality over quantity, Jake replied, echoing Czar's words. Our ships have been upgraded with Corvin stealth technology, and the plasma weapon's been developed. And Paul's Mars unit has been training for exactly this kind of operation. It's still a massive risk, Lisa pointed out. If we lose our fleet, we lose any hope of liberating Earth. If we do nothing, we lose anyway, Jake countered. The Council is tightening its grip. They're bringing in more control ships every month. We need a victory. Something to show the galaxy that the Council isn't invincible. After hours of debate, the decision was made. The combined resistance fleet would attack the Council armada at Titan. Not with the expectation of destroying all enemy vessels, but with the goal of capturing or destroying their command ship. The battle plan was complex. The resistance fleet would approach using the rings of Saturn as cover, their hulls coated with materials that absorbed scanner pulses. Corvin electronic warfare ships would jam Council communications at the critical moment, while the fastest human vessels would make a direct assault on the command ship. Paul Murphy's Mars unit, now integrated with elite warriors from 3 other species, would board the command ship and seize control of its systems. If successful, they would use it to broadcast the truth about the Council's protective custody to the entire galaxy. The day of the attack arrived. Jake stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, now scarred from previous engagements, but still humanity's proudest achievement. Around them, the combined fleet waited in formation, hidden among Saturn's rings. All ships report ready, Roy said from the tactical station. His relationship with Jake had evolved from professional tension to mutual respect, their different approaches now complementing rather than conflicting with each other. Paul's team is in position, Lisa added. She had become their de facto intelligence officer, coordinating information flow between resistance cells. Jake took a deep breath. Begin electronic countermeasures. Launch attack craft. The Endeavor will lead the main assault. The battle began with confusion among the Council fleet. Their communications suddenly filled with static, their sensors showing phantom targets appearing and disappearing throughout Saturn's rings. By the time they realized an actual attack was underway, the first wave of resistance fighters had already breached their perimeter. The Endeavor. Engines pushed beyond their design limits, shot through the Council formation, drawing fire from dozens of vessels but somehow evading critical damage. Behind them came the boarding craft carrying Paul's Special Forces team. Council command ship identified, Roy called out. Bearing 34 Mark 7. Target their propulsion systems, Jake ordered. We need to keep them from escaping. The Endeavor's newly installed plasma cannons fired, the superheated matter striking the command ship's engine housing with devastating effect. The massive vessel listed to one side, emergency systems failing as secondary explosions cascaded through its infrastructure. Paul's team is away, Lisa reported. Boarding successful. What followed was 50 minutes of the most intense combat any of them had experienced. The Resistance fleet, vastly outnumbered but fighting with desperate innovation, managed to destroy or disable 30 Council vessels while losing 20 of their own. The remaining Council ships, confused by contradictory orders and the loss of central coordination, began to withdraw to defensive positions. On the Council command ship, Paul Murphy led his 12-person team through corridors filled with defensive robots and the occasional living crew member. The Council had grown so reliant on automated systems that they had minimal organic personnel on most vessels. Central Command should be 2 levels up, Paul told his team, as they fought their way through another security checkpoint. Once we're in, Amy's team can access their defense network. The final push to the command center cost them 3 team members, but they succeeded. The ship's commander, a being of the same species as Zavranex, surrendered when faced with the determination of the boarding party. Paul immediately established communication with the Endeavor. Command center secured, beginning data transfer now. Amy Rodriguez, coordinating from the Rocky Mountains facility via quantum-entangled communicators, began the process of infiltrating the Council's automated defense systems. Her team had spent months developing a program that could override the protocols controlling thousands of security drones throughout Council space. I'm in, she transmitted after 20 tense minutes. I have access to their command protocols. Uploading the override now. Throughout the Council fleet, automated systems suddenly stopped responding to their controllers. Defense turrets powered down, and drone ships drifted aimlessly. The few Council vessels with predominantly organic crews found themselves alone and vulnerable. Jake seized the moment. All ships, press the advantage. Target their remaining command and control vessels. The Resistance fleet surged forward, now facing greatly diminished opposition. The Council ships, recognizing their sudden vulnerability, began a disorganized retreat. But the victory at Titan was just the beginning. Using the captured command ship's communications array, Paul broadcast a message to every Council world and vessel. The transmission included evidence of the Council's duplicity, not just toward humans, but toward dozens of species over thousands of years. To all beings under Council rule, Paul's message began. You have been lied to. The so-called protective custody is nothing more than enslavement. Today, we struck a blow for freedom. Join us. The time for submission is over. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On world after world, populations that had lived under Council protection for generations rose up. The Trialaxians, an insectoid species from a system near the galactic core, seized control of their orbital facilities. The aquatic beings of Hydros Prime disabled the Council monitoring stations that had restricted their ocean world for centuries. The Hive clusters, a collective intelligence that had been deliberately fragmented by Council interference, began reunifying. News of the victory at Titan reached Earth within days. Kate Sullivan, receiving the transmission in the Rocky Mountains complex, allowed herself a moment of fierce joy before turning to her staff. It's time, she said. Activate all cells. The Council's control is fracturing. This is our chance. Across Earth, resistance groups that had been building strength in secret launched coordinated attacks on Council installations. The sudden uprising, combined with the malfunctioning automated systems, threw the occupation into chaos. In orbit, Council ships found themselves under attack from within as human crew members, forced to serve as assistants, turned on their overseers. Susan Clark's spy network provided targeting data for ground-based energy weapons that Ben Hayes had developed, allowing Earth forces to disable key Council vessels. Jake, observing reports from across the galaxy, recognized the critical moment had arrived. "We need to strike at their political center," he told his command staff. "With their military in disarray, we can end this now." The combined resistance fleet, now grown to over 300 vessels with the addition of ships from newly liberated worlds, set course for the Council's political headquarters, a massive space station at the confluence of several major transit routes. The Council leaders, including Zavranex, had retreated to this supposedly impregnable fortress. They still controlled significant military assets and were attempting to reorganize their forces to crush the spreading rebellion. Jake's plan was audacious. While the main fleet engaged the station's defenses, a small strike team, including himself, Paul, and representatives from each major resistance faction, would infiltrate the station using a captured Council diplomatic vessel. Once inside, he explained to the strike team, "We fight our way to the central chamber. Our goal is to force the Council to formally dissolve the protective custody protocols and recognize the independence of all subjugated worlds." "And if they refuse?" asked Zar, who had joined the strike team. Jake's expression hardened. "Then we take control of the station and do it ourselves." The assault on the Council Political Center began 3 days later. The resistance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, immediately launching fighter craft and jamming Council communications. The diplomatic vessel carrying Jake's strike team approached under the cover of the larger battle. Using authentication codes extracted from the captured command ship, they gained access to a secondary docking bay. "Remember," Jake told the team as they prepared to disembark, "we need to reach the central chamber with enough strength remaining to secure it. Avoid unnecessary engagements." For 3 hours, they fought their way through the station's defenses. Council security forces, still partially reliant on automated systems compromised by Amy's team, mounted a disorganized defense. Nevertheless, the strike team suffered casualties, losing 4 of their 12 members before reaching the approach to the central chamber. Outside the massive doors to the Council chambers, Jake paused to contact the fleet. "We're in position. Status report." Roy's voice came through, strained but triumphant. "Council fleet is in retreat. We've secured the station's outer defenses. Amy reports that she's locked down their internal security systems. You're clear to proceed." Jake nodded to Paul, who placed breaching charges on the chamber doors. The explosion echoed through the station, and the strike team rushed in, weapons ready. Inside, they found the 7 counselors huddled behind a force field, surrounded by their last loyal guards. Zavranex stepped forward, his golden fur now dull with stress, but his demeanor still imperious. "This insurrection will fail," he declared. "The Council has maintained order in this galaxy for millennia. Without our guidance, chaos will reign." "Your guidance is enslavement," Jake replied, stepping forward. "And it ends today." For 3 days, the strike team held the central chamber, negotiating the terms of the Council's surrender, while battles continued throughout Council space. Gradually, system after system declared independence or allegiance to the new coalition forming around the resistance. Finally, Zavranex and the remaining counselors recognized their position was untenable. With their military fractured, their automated systems compromised, and uprisings on hundreds of worlds, they had no choice but to capitulate. The formal dissolution of the Council's authority was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Jake, standing before the communication array that reached thousands of worlds, delivered the message himself. Today marks the end of an era of deception and control. The beings of this galaxy will no longer be subject to protective custody or any other euphemism for enslavement. Each world, each species, has the right to determine its own destiny. As the Council regime collapsed, the various resistance movements came together to form a new interstellar association, one based on mutual respect and genuine cooperation rather than domination. The Corvin, the Free Worlds Alliance, the Trialaxians, the aquatic species, and the hive minds joined with humanity and dozens of other formerly subjugated species to establish new principles for a galactic cooperation. On Earth, the departure of Council forces was met with celebration. Admiral Kate Sullivan, addressing a global audience from what had once been Council headquarters in Geneva, summed up humanity's new position in the galaxy. "Today, we reclaim our freedom," she declared. "But we also embrace a new responsibility as members of a galactic community. And to any who would seek to dominate others as the Council did, we give this warning, this single word that will echo across the stars: run." In the months that followed, the new alliance, calling itself the Free Federation, began the process of establishing fair trade routes, mutual defense agreements, and cultural exchange programs. Lisa Carter, having overcome her guilt through her contributions to the resistance, became a key diplomatic advisor, helping to craft agreements that were transparent and equitable. Roy Blake, initially skeptical of cooperation with alien species, found himself impressed by the courage and honor demonstrated by their allies during the conflict. He accepted a position coordinating the combined defense forces of the Federation, working to ensure that no power could ever again threaten the freedom of member worlds. Paul Murphy and his Mars unit became the core of a new rapid response force, trained to address crises throughout Federation space without resorting to the heavy-handed methods of the former Council. Ben Hayes and Amy Rodriguez continued their work on defensive technologies, now sharing their innovations openly with all Federation members. Their focus shifted from weapons to systems that could protect vulnerable populations from natural disasters and other non-military threats. Susan Clark's intelligence network evolved into an information-sharing system that helped member worlds coordinate responses to common challenges, from resource shortages to environmental crises. And Jake Morrison, the commander who had led the resistance from its desperate beginnings to ultimate victory, found himself respected throughout the galaxy not just as a military leader, but as a symbol of determination in the face of overwhelming odds. 1 year after the Battle of Titan, representatives from all Federation worlds gathered on Kepler Prime, the planet where humanity's subjugation had begun, to formalize their new alliance. The landing platform that had once hosted the deceptive treaty ceremony now supported a diverse gathering of free beings. Jake stood at the edge of the platform, gazing up at the purple sky now filled with the lights of ships from 100 worlds. Lisa joined him, her diplomatic uniform now bearing the insignia of the Free Federation. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when we fled this place a year ago?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "I hoped for Earth's freedom. I never dreamed we'd help liberate half the galaxy." "We had help," Lisa reminded him. "We couldn't have done it alone." "No one can," Jake replied. That was the Council's fundamental lie, that some species needed to be controlled for their own good. The truth is, we all need each other, but as equals, not as masters and subjects. As the formal ceremony began, Jake looked out at the assembled representatives, beings of every shape, size, and evolutionary background, united not by force, but by shared principles of freedom and cooperation. The sky above Kepler Prime was filled with stars, each one now representing not a distant, unreachable point of light, but a potential partner in a new galactic community. The word that Admiral Sullivan had proclaimed, "Run," had indeed echoed across the stars, serving not just as a warning to would-be oppressors, but as a rallying cry for all who valued freedom. And as the new Federation Charter was signed, a document meticulously crafted for transparency, with translations verified by multiple independent sources, Jake felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with betrayal had led to something far greater than mere revenge, or even justice. It had created a new beginning, a chance for all sentient beings to determine their own destiny among the stars.